The exact opposite of what we had last week when we were looking ahead to temperatures in the 90s. Well, that wasn't today by any means, just back to early spring weather in the Northeast. In the meantime, we've got some leftover, what's the word? Yeah, that too. Winter weather direct across the Northwest and through the Northern Plains. Severe weather risks tomorrow in the Central Plains to the upper Mississippi Valley, but we'll have sunshine and nice weather in the east. And all of that will be described in such incredible detail, you will all be astonished tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, in full spring mode for you landscapers or you homeowners that need some mulch or topsoil or whatever else to make your home look great. 631-756-1125 is the phone number for the best prices anywhere. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And brought to you by our affiliate, Tempest, by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing network on the planet, Joe, on the planet. And the link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also in the description of this video on YouTube. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get an extra 10% off. So there.
I feel so important now that you actually have to mention our names to get a discount somewhere.
Yes, yes, that should apply everywhere. If you go in if you go in any store and they, you should say, "I watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show," and they'll immediately respond by saying, "Well, your watchers of the Joe and Joe Weather Show who shop here get X% off." Works for me. Oh well.
Anyway,
we're back and trying to get to some semblance of normalcy here.
I want to tell you, Joe, it was like March today. I mean, what a crazy weekend. I mean, it was Friday, 92, Saturday still quite mild. Then it started getting colder as we moved into Sunday, and I mean, like, my goodness, today I was half expecting to see snow. I mean, we had widely scattered light showers, but I said it feels cold enough so that I might see a few wet snowflakes mixing in from time to time.
Well, Joe Z on the chat board, I think he's around the Scranton area. He said he had sleet there. I wouldn't be surprised.
I believe it.
And I saw stuff on the radar, so makes it. Yeah, it definitely had a March feel. One of my more interesting comments that I saw on Facebook on one of my posts, I think it was on Angry Ben's post, that somebody said, we haven't had a normal spring in 20 years. It's been like this every year, where it gets hot, then it gets cold, then it gets gloomy, and all the rest of it. And I just thought, no, I think you got that backwards. I think that's because the way it has been for the last 20 years pretty much is how spring is. Where do people get these notions somehow that, I'm picturing a certain, I can't remember which Bugs Bunny cart. Oh, I remember. Okay. The one, one with the wrestler. And he's fighting Ravishing Ronald. Okay, and as Ravishing Ronald, as he's being introduced, a fairy or something comes dancing across and throwing pixie dust or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
That's what. Where did people get that?
Is that the one? Is that the one where?
The Crusher.
Yeah, and he's holding up as he's getting killed. He's holding up little signs like "Help!"
Help!
Yeah, yikes!
But where did this fanciful idea? I mean, particularly in the Northeast. I mean, okay, if you're in the southern part of the Mid-Atlantic, if you're in the Southeast, okay, I get it. It is spring is like that for the most part. It starts early. It's a gradual warm up. Yeah, you occasionally get the gloom and doom type days, but it's not. It's nothing you can't handle. Most of the time, it behaves according to plan. But in the Northeast, it's always been like this. In fact, it only gets worse once. Was it last year? I think it got worse in May, where most of the month was rain and doom and gloom. So it ain't over yet.
The Memorial Day holiday was atrocious. You remember it was like barely out of the 40s with drizzle or light rain. So we never seem to get what you want. I mean, we never get spring. We jumped right into summer. We got exceedingly hot, and then all of a sudden we took a left turn and went right back to late winter with the day like we had today, with the wind and the chill winds and the occasional on and off light precipitation, be it rain or sleet or whatever like that. Tomorrow should be a little bit better. I mean, at least we'll have sunshine and it'll get back into the 50s. But we still have a rather gusty wind to deal with tomorrow, Joe. Maybe at least up in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
I'm thinking winds could be like 20, 25 miles an hour at times. And that'll make those temperatures in the 50s feel like the 40s again.
Yeah, the high goes offshore, but which is different from last week, because last week the high kind of settled in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, and you had basically a west wind, except for right on the beaches. You had a west wind and no sea breeze at all, and a good deal of sunshine. So of course you're going to warm up like crazy. This is different because the high is going to be offshore. The gradient is not tight at all, and I think as we go through the week, you're going to have to start dealing with more and more of a variability, particularly as we get toward the weekend, where the wind is going to try to bend around more southeast or even south or southeast at some point. So our temperature's going to rise, yes, but they should be far more limited in terms of how high we get at the end of the week. We're not going to go to the 90s again.
No, but we may see. I would think on Friday. I think temperatures will get back up into the middle 80s, which is still.
Oh, I mean, it certainly could get into the 80s. My question is, because of there's a much weaker high this time around, and there's a much weaker gradient, that you might get into more of a southeast wind. Not a wet southeast wind, but a mostly dry southeast wind, and that might hold the I mean, it's still, I think it could get to 80 or even low 80s. I don't know if it's going to get much higher than that, but we're not pushing 90, 91, 92, or in the case of last week in Eastern Connecticut, where it got to 95 and 96 at Hartford. So at Brainerd and Bradley. So that's not going to happen.
Somebody told me that Bradley Airport was the national high. Is that true, or did you hear anything along those?
On that day, I think it may have very well been.
I think they got to 96 at Bradley or whatever, and they said that was the national high. That's amazing. New York City has only been one time out of all those years, Easter 1976. In fact, what is today? Today is the 18th of April. Today is the anniversary of the exceedingly hot Easter Sunday in 1976, where New York hit 96. That later was tied for the all-time record high in the month of April. And also New York was the national high on that particular day. So
that was 3 days. That was 3 days in a row.
Absolutely. It finally, I think, I may be wrong because it was so long ago, but I think some kind of a backdoor front came in and cooled everything down after Easter Monday.
The next day, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it fell short of making it 4 days in a row because the back door kind of timed out, just so.
Right.
Oh, well. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight to do tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Nice to see most of the regulars and a few occasionals on there. Ryan Ford, good to see you on the chat board there. Subscribe to the Joe and Joe. You can subscribe to my weather channel. So you could. Let me start this again. You could subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m., Sundays at 11 a.m. Although, Joe, we may have to figure out something different for this Sunday. But we'll talk about that in the coming days. And Fridays and Saturdays we're usually off unless there's some big storm around. and there's not there shouldn't be this Friday and Saturday. So, any other opening comments that you have?
Bernardo will be able to, maybe on the chat board, or maybe she'll hand me a note or something. I'm not sure if it's Saturday or Sunday that that her German club is having a special dinner to honor the armed services people, and of course we will be there. But again, I'm not sure if it's a Saturday or a Sunday. If it's Sunday, then it's going to be in the late afternoon and evening, and then that means that the scheduling on Sunday may be even more in jeopardy. But then again, it might be Saturday, in which case then we don't have to worry about Sunday.
All right.
I don't know.
We'll figure.
It's crazy. I do have to say something about this past weekend.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. How did I'm sure I saw some pictures. I'm sure it went famously.
Well, it did. It was very, very nice because a number of great people in astronomy and aeronautics were there. I got a chance to sit down with Jerry Griffith, who in the 1960s and 70s was in charge, or the flight director at several Apollo missions to the moon, and also was in charge of the LBJ, the Lyndon B. Johnson Flight Center in Houston, Texas, and deputy director at the Kennedy Space Center. I also had a chance to interact with the commander, the first woman commander of a space shuttle mission, Eileen Collins, and there were many others. But I wanted the thing that stands out about this was held at the Rockland County Community College, and as you know, it was blistering hot on Friday, and it was still very warm on Saturday. And apparently, there's some kind of dictum at the college where they are not allowed to turn on the air conditioning until May the 1st. And you can only imagine. I'm surprised. I said to somebody before I stepped on stage on Saturday to give the opening remarks and to kick off the whole session, I said to somebody, I said, this might be a first for me. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I might be the first person ever to collapse right in the middle of the stage, in the middle of my talk or in the middle of my speech. You cannot believe, Joe, how incredibly warm it was. And the people who put this whole thing together, this was the first time that they put something like this together since before the pandemic in 2019. And since then, the price of renting out the building, renting out the college for this event had gone up or multiplied by about a factor of 2 or 3. Now there's no air conditioning, and you can imagine that the people putting this together were exceedingly irate and were complaining bitterly to the college, saying, we've paid enough for these facilities. Now
turn the AC on, yeah.
Turn the AC on, for goodness sake. And they finally did, break down. Not until after most of the Saturday events were over. Sunday was a lot nicer, but still. And even at our hotel, Joe, Renata and I were at at a hotel in Montebello, not just a stone's throw away from the college, and our room was 75 degrees Friday evening. We played with the thermostat. Renata put it down to like 60 with the fan up on high. But it's just like when you go into your car and you turn the fan on high, but you don't turn on the one key element, the AC button.
Right.
This was like hot air coming out of the vent.
Oh, God.
And that's how we were. And so we were bitterly complaining at the front desk on Saturday morning. And when we got back to our hotel room on Saturday evening, it was 66 degrees. And we're not even lowered it a couple of more degrees. And whereas it was like two different stories. It was one of the worst nights that we ever had to spend in a hot room. And then the next night it was so cool. It was so much nicer.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
It was the worst of times. So anyway, it was a good weekend. And yeah, thank God we got rid of the heat. The heat came much too early. And you know what? Like 10 days ago, where I live, nothing on the trees, not even a sign of a single bud. Now, today, like 10 days later, after all that heat, everything is in bloom.
Mm-hmm.
The trees are out. The pollen, the tree pollen is like off the scales because of everything popping out so quickly.
It's like
It's
magic.
it's like magic.
Magic.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
let's wish Scott Briller hitting super chat tonight, and it was Mother Briller's birthday yesterday. So and she turns double eights. She turned double eights. Many blessings and happy birthday to Mother Briller. I hope she's watching. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And thanks for the tip jar hit, Scott. Most appreciated. So let's get moving here and take a look at what's going on weather-wise, because in April, things most years it just slowly winds down. You start to see, you still wind up seeing areas where there's some winter weather around, but as the days go by and the weeks go by, the areas tend to geographically cover smaller and smaller ranges, and that's sort of what we have tonight. They're getting a little smaller. We've got a few winter storm warnings up in north central Montana, northeastern Montana as well, and northwestern North Dakota with winter weather advisories surrounding that. We've got flood advisories also up in that general area due to melting snows, so elevation plays a key. We also have some winter weather advisories up in parts of the Cascades along the West Coast. We've wind advisories in parts of the Central Rockies, also down into Southern California and Arizona. A handful of counties there in central Kansas. In the east, it's red flag warnings because it is kind of very dry here, by the way, Joe. I got to 75. The humidity is down in the 20 to 25% range. So they've been sort of warning about the possibility of brush fires. We've got red flag warnings up in much of West Virginia and Virginia, eastern Maryland, and the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula, and the frost and freeze advisories, freeze warnings for parts of Ohio, western PA, and parts of southern Michigan. The big upper low, it's funny, I don't think we saw an upper low stalled in southeastern Canada all winter long, and lo and behold, there it is now in the month of April. It's basically taken, Joe, the better part of 3 days for this thing to move from northern Wisconsin, which is where it was on Sunday, to where it is now. And the southern edge of those clouds have kind of pulled up a little bit this evening, so maybe the worst of it is over as far as the cloud cover is concerned. But you're still going to be under the rotation of this thing. And meanwhile, just to the south of that,
cyclonic curvature.
Yes, and that benefits me greatly here in Northeast Georgia. We had an absolutely picture-perfect day. It was 33 this morning was my low, and the high was 75 at my house. Wow. It was kind of beautiful blue skies and sunshine. You see on the satellite from Virginia down through just about the whole state of Florida, except the Panhandle. We've got some shower and storm activity going on. Nothing crazy. Along from East Texas and into the Gulf, southern Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. And you can see the moisture that's gathering up in the Northwest with a storm that's off the West Coast. That's going to continue to shoot energy inland. Did you get any precip at all today?
Oh yeah, there was some scattered showers. I mean nothing significant, nothing heavy, but you step outside, take the dog out, and it's raining. I see on the top of the garbage pail, big spots of moisture. So it was that kind of a day on and off. I mean, sometimes you step out, nothing was happening. Other times you step out, there'd be a little bit of precip, and of course the wind was gusty for most of the day. So it was that kind of. It was that, like I said, it was like a day in March.
I'm looking at the radar. I got it up on the screen. There's a nice patch of precip up there in upstate New York. It's probably rain and snow mixed in a lot of those areas there.
Wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it.
Chuck Cardillo, you might see a snow shower or a rain shower or both up in the Catskills as this area pivots east. Got some precip, some rain in eastern Maine at the moment, but everybody else up and down the East Coast is nice and quiet. A little bit of, there was some heavier activity earlier. It's kind of lightened up here in southern Louisiana, East Texas, Looks like maybe a shower or thunderstorm just west of San Antonio there in Texas. Meanwhile, you can see patches of precip in the plains down into Wyoming, back up into Montana. Again, it's going to be elevation is going to drive snow amounts, and also along the west coast from Northern California northward, we're seeing some showery rains and some snow showers in the mountains in inland areas. The Storm Prediction Center at SPC, as we take a look at what's going on with those folks, we've got a marginal risk tonight across Montana, into South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, then kind of fingers down into western Kansas, western Oklahoma, and western Texas. We're going to see activity picking up tomorrow and on Thursday. So we've got a slight risk of severe weather. This doesn't look to me like a widespread severe weather event. So it's got slight risk from west central Oklahoma northeastward into Iowa. The marginal risk reaches up into southern Wisconsin, goes all the way back down into Texas, and that comes with a 2. That actually, they've upped this a little bit. They had just the general 2% tornado risk. Now they've added a 5% tornado risk in east central Kansas and southeastern Nebraska for tomorrow. And then on the next day, which is going to be Thursday into Friday, we have a marginal risk, Illinois, western Indiana, southward. Then it becomes a slight risk in southern Missouri and goes southwest from there into East Texas. And on the long range, now here's where I'm going to probably disagree. Well, there's a couple of things. They're going, so let me just start this off with day 4. Okay, so day 4, which is Friday into Saturday, you've got that small 15% risk. The area geographically small,
Right.
15
Right.
is slight risk. Southeast Texas across Louisiana. Now, day 5 is Saturday into Sunday. They have predictability too low. Day 6 for Sunday, now they've got potential too low. I don't know. I kind of looked at Sunday and thought that maybe with this next approaching cold front, that I don't think it would be anything beyond a marginal risk, but maybe they may have to stick a marginal risk somewhere in the east for Sunday. I don't know how you feel about the matter.
I just thought that it was a day to look kind of showery from start to finish. I mean, a good chance of getting wet, and I wasn't really thinking about convection. I wasn't really. I got to tell you, I wasn't really thinking. Period, too hard.
Yeah.
I was not laboring over more precise potentials or anything. It would surprise me maybe if we did get a rumble or two of thunder, but I think I have to wait until we get a little closer to start talking about that. But I do think that this weekend does look more cloudy than sunny, and it does look more wet than dry, particularly on Sunday. Sunday looks like the wetter of the 2 weekend days, at least from this vantage point right now.
They've got anywhere from an inch to an inch and a half plus. WPC does for much of eastern Pennsylvania, upstate New York. And then they got area a little bit less for the Hudson Valley. And then it goes back up again. It almost looks like a wintertime snowfall map where you know how they east of the Hudson, they lower the amounts and then they raise them again when they go into in the Berkshires. That's kind of how they have
Right.
the rain map drawn. But a nice soaking inch to an inch and a half of rain would actually be quite useful at this point, considering the heat of last week. And by the way, just really quick, I don't know if you were paying any attention on Saturday. I was shocked at talk about thunderstorms blowing up on Saturday across New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. It looked like a summertime map in a tropical air mass. That little upper low, that was sort of the upper low that could, because that way overproduced in terms of thunderstorm activity and intensity as well.
Yeah, we were at a restaurant on Saturday, and had a broad window across from us, and on more than one occasion, we were in Mahwah, New Jersey, and so we more than one occasion I noticed that there was some bright flashes out there, and I said, "Oh, looks like we had a little lightning and thunder going on." Or I didn't hear the thunder, but I certainly saw the lightning. So Yeah, we did. But again, that was not completely unexpected. I think we were going for the possibility late Saturday or Saturday evening
Oh,
for
no, no.
a bit of lightning and thunder.
Yeah, no, no, I understand that, but it wasn't. I mean, there were a bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings that went out. There were a bunch of flash flood warnings that went out. There were some really impressive cells that developed there. I just SPC actually initially didn't. I don't think they even had thunderstorms indicated, or maybe they did, or just maybe a sharp cutoff at some point, which they ultimately had to update. But they never even went to a marginal risk. But these weren't lines. This was just from the upper low. Sort of what happens in the summertime, where you can get these intense thunderstorms that produce heavy rains, but it doesn't necessarily fall under the criteria of risk. However, they figure that out.
Just clusters, maybe.
Yeah.
Little clusters of storms, bubbling up. Or as the late great Tex Antoine once said, we've got a situation where we're going to see storms percolate
Something like
in
that.
the late day out. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Big rains in the lower Mississippi Valley, 1.5 to 3 inches plus this week. And that also extends into parts of the Ohio Valley, also in and around the Great Lakes. We've got anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. And in the Pacific Northwest, it continues to be on the wet side, except in the mountains. And I just wanted to go back to that whole idea with snow. So this is on the digital forecast. You can see the snow amounts. The heaviest amounts are actually right along the North Dakota-Canada border, where there's a couple of areas of a foot plus, which is where we see some of those winter storm warnings that are up. And also along east of I-15 in Montana, we're seeing some clusters here of 2 feet plus, probably in elevated areas. Otherwise, most of the amounts are kind of subdued, reaching down into Colorado and over into Utah. And then you see, into Idaho, rather, and just a little bit in Utah. And then you see up and down the Cascades, nothing except, there's a 30 print up there to the east of Olympia, Washington, well to the east of Olympia and Seattle. But, again, this is probably some mountaintop someplace. There's also a 34 print there. And I even saved... Did I get rid? Oh, I had the probabilities of at least 2. I don't know what I did with it. It looks like the map is gone. So, wait. Is that it? Yep, there it is. Here's the probability for at least 2 across the Dakotas in northern Minnesota, some pockets back in Montana, so up and down the Cascades, also reaching down into Colorado. We could put in the probability. Let's try the probability of at least 8. And right along that Canadian border there with North Dakota, northeastern Montana, about the only areas you got 50% or higher. That also, by the way, extends into northern Minnesota, where we have the probability of at least 8 at least 50%, and also in parts of the Cascades. Now, wouldn't you know, by the way, as I was looking at some of the runs today with some of the models, you finally have gotten rid of this, maybe I spoke too soon. There's still energy trying to move into the west, but overall, Joe, it looks like it's finally getting a ridge out there. And it does kind of look a little bit on the blocky side as we go through the longer term. So I think after this weekend, as we go through the end of April and start to get into the first days of May, it looks like it's going to be on the coolish side. Now, whether it's wet, I don't know.
It's too far in advance for me to even start thinking about, my goodness, May already. We're talking about May. Well, it's, we'll see what happens with the passage of, with the passage of time.
Hold on. Thank you. Some sad soul named Jason Genova on the chat board has just been deleted. Well, that made my day. Okay, so let's check out. Let me roll back for Sunday. So, we've got this upper low finally pulls out. There's some ridging here in the east. There's an upper high that's closed off the east coast, off the coast of Florida, but it's nothing really that strong. We do see a trough digging down into the Mississippi Valley on Friday. And there's actually a pretty good short wave that drops down into Illinois by the time we get to Saturday afternoon. And then it just sort of lifts up around the Great Lakes. Doesn't make a lot of progress east here. So this next cold front, Joe, is going to crawl across the area. And it may have a real tough time getting out of the way because we still have a mostly southerly flow even into Monday of next week. So, unfortunately, it might mean that, we may get into this late Saturday night and during the day, Sunday and Sunday night, and have a real tough time clearing it out on Monday if this is the case.
And I don't think that we're going to see much in the way of clearing or sunshine until not necessarily Monday, but Tuesday. I think we'll have to wait till Tuesday. So enjoy whatever sunshine we get. I think on Saturday, definitely Saturday looks like to be the drier and brighter and sunnier of the 2 weekend days. But then we go into, the Cioffiism gloom and doom for Sunday. And it still looks like some residual shower activity around, especially in the early part of the day on Monday before we go back into at least some partial sunshine on Tuesday.
Ken Musillo, by the way, hit the tip jar. Thanks, Ken.
Ken, thank you.
Yes. Thanks for hitting.
I wasn't sure whether or not you were waiting for me to add to the thank you, Ken.
No, I had a little bit of a moment there. I kind of faded for a moment. All right, so there's your map here. Your low, nice little low there that runs up into northwestern North Dakota. A new low forms down in Colorado and then runs up into Minnesota. Now, this sort of justifies the severe weather potential for Thursday with the trailing front down into Texas. And you can actually see Thursday night, the GFS does generate what looks like a fairly narrowish long line from northeast Texas all the way up into Indiana. That low just sort of fades out. So then we have to wait for another wave to develop, which it does on Friday night. So that's where your severe weather starts to shift further to the east. We got a low in northern Mississippi that runs up into Ohio and then lifts up northwestward into Lake Huron. And here comes your front for Sunday. Now, this is, the new GFS has got rain pretty much on our doorstep by early after midnight Saturday night. And then It takes all day long, really kind of generates a lot of moisture here in a narrow line that takes, the back edge takes forever to just move across eastern Pennsylvania. By 1 a.m., it's just moving out. Monday, it's still just moving out of New York City, and it still has lingering precip there into southern New England with a little low that forms. And then, as you said, maybe some improvement on Tuesday. Actually, Joe, that's even on Tuesday. It still has this a low sitting near Montauk, with some rain back to about, Long Island and Western Connecticut. And then as soon as that goes out, it tries to shove some energy underneath and another low that goes out to the west later next week. So, you know what? If it does improve, it should improve after whatever happens Sunday into Monday, but the improvement is going to be short-lived because there's more energy right behind it.
Right. It looks like they're closing the gap between each disturbance. So whatever clearing or whatever improvement we get in between systems will be short-lived because, as you just mentioned, Joe, things are moving quick enough. It's a progressive pattern, so we may be right back into unsettled conditions here by the middle of next week.
And I'm just looking at the GFS rainfall forecast. This is through Monday afternoon. It has a size of 2 to 3 inches of liquid for northern New Jersey, the lower Hudson Valley, northeast PA, up through the Catskills, and then going all the way up almost into northern New York. It's got 1.5 inches plus for Long Island, a 2-inch plus in western Connecticut. I mean, it's got a fairly wet look here for early next week for this cold front that's coming. In fact, I'm just going to widen out because this is cumulative precip over the next 6 days. And you can see where the other area of heavy rain that was being indicated was in the lower Mississippi Valley. And you see there's a cluster there of 3 to 4 inches that the GFS produces in northern Mississippi and western Tennessee. So it does look fairly wet with this slow-moving front. But you know what? It's only Tuesday, so you've got 4 days of in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. The weather should be fairly decent for the next 4 days overall.
And that's good. We could use decent weather.
We can, and we
Yes.
should. Absolutely. Let me get you. No, I was going to ask you your opinion on something. It was in my head. And again, I'm having one of those nights tonight. So I just forgot what I was going to ask you. Oh well. It'll come to me. Do you have Briller Jeopardy?
I will check. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything from Scott in a while, so
Let me see.
for anybody.
I might have it. Let's see if I have it. I don't know if I have it.
It might have been that Scott. Might have been that Scott took a day off because of Mom's birthday.
No. I do have something here. Okay, you ready, everybody? It's time to play. We're going to play Briller Jeopardy here on Mother Briller's birthday. So here we go. So there are two states that begin with the letters K, S, T, or V. Okay?
K, S, T, or V?
Yes. Each one of those letters has two states named that starts with the letter. Two states start with the letter K, two with the letter S, two with the letter T, and two with the letter V. So in total, we have 8 states here in play. And Jason Schaefer and Frank Riccio, Kansas and Kentucky, so they've got the Ks. Very good.
Yes. Yeses are South Dakota and South Carolina, I believe.
South Dakota and South Carolina are the S's, correct? So
T. I got one of the T's.
Anthony Spiraccio gets the V's, Vermont and Virginia. So T is in Thomas.
Alfred K. Phillips, Oklahoma doesn't count.
Tyler Fenga has the other, Texas and Tennessee.
Tennessee.
So we've got them all. That went quick. I would have to figure out a way to maybe slow it down a little bit. But yeah, so the states with the letter K, just Kansas and Kentucky. The S states were South Carolina and South Dakota. The T states, Tennessee and Texas. And the V states, Virginia and Vermont. And I now remember what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
So you know how we've talked about how in the wintertime we don't get Alberta Clippers anymore. Remember those conversations? And I was thinking about this, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall, at least in the 70s, especially in the 70s, and probably the 80s as well, where we had numerous times over the course of the year where we get these north-south fronts stalled east of the Appalachians or right along the coast, and it would rain for days.
Yeah.
For days. And I'm telling you, I'm kind of hard-pressed, even in some of these, and this is totally different from setups when I talk about when we get in the springtime with gloom and doom stuff. I'm talking about stuff that used to set up maybe in north-south fashion in September, in October, in also in the spring months, but different from the marine flow type scenarios. And we would get days and days of rain and flash flooding and all the rest of it. That doesn't seem to happen anymore. I can't remember the last time we've had a stalled front, a north-south stalled front with waves rippling up the coast where it rains for 4 or 5 days and get flash flooding all over the place. That doesn't happen anymore.
You're right. We used to get quite a bit of that, And we used to pick up, over a span of like 2 or 3 days, we'd get like 2 to maybe even 4 inches of rain. And you say that, when is this all going to end? And it never seemed to, because again, it was due to a stalled or stuck weather system, a stagnant weather system that just didn't want to move very much. Or you had, again, this undulating pattern where you had a frontal zone that was literally crossing right through the tri-state area, and every time it undulated, a little wave of low pressure, and the rain or the precipitation would intensify. Then it would go away as that wave moved away, and instead of completely moving on out, you get another wave moving through. You had to wait sometimes for like 3 or 4 waves before the final wave was enough to push by and turn the winds around into a northwesterly direction, and then push the whole darn thing offshore. Yeah, we don't see that very
No,
much anymore, do we?
no, we don't. And by the way,
No.
is undulating the kind of word that the sensors would have well, the sensors that we all know are run by Sister Charles Edwards, where we'd have a problem with that's
I don't think it's a problem, but if
I mean,
mental
undulate.
images.
I'm trying. That's not a word that's used very often. So it's just where else but on the Joe and Joe Weather Show can you have words like undulate?
Well, I know during my illustrious TV career, more than once I actually did that. But of course, also to help along everything, I would actually put my hand in front of the aforementioned front and go like this to try to give people the idea. I think that actually dates back to before we had the ability to actually animate weather systems and weather fronts on our
Right.
maps. I would do stuff like that. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking about, remember what came after the Aurora system at News 12? The first WSI
The first primitive WSI system,
had
I mean,
the
primitive by today's standards.
they called
was
it
state of the art then.
right. They called it Protean. No, it wasn't WSI. What was the system that we had
Was it
before
Protean?
WSI?
But
Protean paint, but it was not.
paint. But what was it on?
It was not. It was not a WSI system. It was like Newsmax. Was that it, or WeatherMax?
I don't remember.
I don't
Joe,
know.
I don't even remember. Honestly, I remember the phrase Protean paint, but I don't remember if there was a weather system that we got in between that sad Aurora system. My God, that thing was so ridiculous. If the graphics didn't exactly match the palette was even slightly different, you'd get this big blank white screen that would roll up in between, and it looked awful when that happened. You're trying to send out resume tapes to other television stations, and you get these graphics that just look absolutely horrendous. Because in those days, the New York stations were actually among the big market stations because they just didn't give a damn about weather at all. They were among the last stations to go to, these graphic systems, because when I worked in Corpus Christi in the early 1980s, one of the first stations to get, if I recall, we were one of the first stations to get a WSI system. And then I had when I went to New Orleans, we had what was that system called? It was a competing system. It was very good, actually, and I don't remember. Oh no, I can't remember what it was called. And then you come to New York and they're still drawn on a chalkboard,
Right?
But that's how it was in those days. Now, of course, they have to do weather every 26 seconds.
Somebody ought to really do the weather the way it used to be done on, the plexiglass and the grease pencil. And my theory is, if you were an excellent communicator, it didn't matter if you had the chroma key wall or all of these computer graphics. You could do a fairly interesting and entertaining weather forecast. I remember, of course, Tex Antoine. There was also John Coleman who did that. I mean, you could be entertaining with these quote primitive methods of presenting the weather, but
Yeah,
now everybody.
but as long as everybody else was on the same page, though, that was fine. But when you had all, when the other, when you have other stations that have sort of state of the art graphics, and you're salivating wanting to use them, and you're having, you basically draw things on a yellow pad and put it in front of a screen.
And they all have. I mean, I know here in New York, CBS Channel 2, NBC Channel 4, ABC Channel 7. I do believe Channel 11, same thing. The only one that has a different computer graphic system is Channel 5, but all the others have WSI. And so when you show the 7-day forecast, like for example with Easter, all the stations except for Channel 5 had the same bunny doing the same hippity
Yeah.
hop on the extended forecast. It was that everybody has the same system, the same graphic system, with different backgrounds to tailor for the station. But when you get to the 7-day outlook, same bunny, Halloween, same pumpkin, Thanksgiving, same turkey, same fireworks display on the 4th of July. It's all the same thing, really.
Oh, by the way, I didn't show you this because you weren't here on Sunday. I showed everybody else, but I'll show you. One of the things I did this weekend, Joe, is I put up my Tempest weather station, and I just put the picture up on the screen there. You should be able to see it shortly, but there it is. Now, I have trees all over the place, and even if I put the darn thing up on the roof, I would never get an accurate. It's hard for me where my location is to get find a spot where I could get an accurate wind speed. Okay, but I was really impressed with this. This thing does. This thing gives you total rainfall, and I did some comparisons with some neighbors in terms of amounts, and it was pretty spot on. And it was. I mounted it on the tree in front of my house. Can you see it on the screen now?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So, I still can do these things that require screws and screwdrivers and I didn't have to get on a ladder. That was another plus, 'cause I definitely wasn't going to do that.
Well, they don't want you to do that, clean out your gutters. They tell you to get these gutter guards or gutter helmets. So it's not fun when you have to climb a 15 or 20-foot ladder, which is why Renata never understands in the late part of November why it's not fun when I have to go all the way up on top of all the way up to the top of the roof to start hanging lights off the front. I mean, they look pretty, but now I've got a son who's going to be like 32 years old, 33 years old. I call him up, Joseph. Want to come over for dinner? Oh, and by the way, before dinner, do you think you may want to climb that ladder? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at that stage of our lives, Joe, where we're past the climbing the ladder stage to hang lights or to put up weather stations or whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't. I'm not. I'm definitely. I'm not. I don't do that. I don't. But I was very happy with. And by the other thing too is I finally it never occurred to me. So I have a wall barometer that a friend of mine gave me, good friend of mine. He's passed away now. But John gave me a wall barometer to hang in my house, and I seldom look at it. And I didn't even look at it close enough to realize the fact that because I'm 2,200 feet up, Joe, my barometer is not giving me a sea level number. It's giving me the actual pressure up here. And so is the weather station. So I finally figured out that I'm at 944 millibars.
Which is
27 8-ish.
Okay, yeah.
Which, if that pressure were at sea level, it'd be, just about a Cat 3 hurricane.
And if you ever remember the old thing about, here, sir, here's a barometer. And if you could tell me how high up you are using the barometer, you can have the barometer. And they used every single methodology except actually looking at the atmospheric pressure. The guy lived on the 27th floor,
Right.
and one of the here he ties a rope to the barometer and drops the barometer down to the street level, and then he says, "Oh, well, the rope is 475 feet long, so we must be 475 feet up." Silly things like that. Um,
Yeah,
I like.
it never occurred to me to look at my barometer and realize that it's going to give me the actual pressure here, 2,200 feet up. But because the weather station actually, when you call it up when you pull it up on your phone, because it has an app, just like everything else does these days, it gave me the pressure. It was just looking at it, it says 27.88, and I thought, gee, that can't be, that's wrong. It's not working right. And then then it suddenly hit me, light bulb moment, ding. And I realized that, oh, good Lord, that's the actual pressure up here because I'm up in the mountains. So why don't I figure out, what level I'm at? And it worked out to 944 millibars. So now in the wintertime, at least I know I could look at the 925 millibar level or 950. And if I can get numbers for them, I know I can get them for 925. If I can get numbers for them, I can figure out where my rain snow line is going to be.
And you live in a place like Denver. I'm sure Denver, when they provide an atmospheric pressure, they have to make a correction because they, after all, are the weather service there must be at least 5,000 feet above sea level.
They're at 850.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you pull up some of the tropical tidbit maps, mostly the short range, if you pull up the 850 maps, you'll notice that there's nothing out in the west. It's all blank.
Right.
Because if they're above
because of the Rocky Mountains.
Because of the mountains.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a revealing moment.
It killed 5 minutes.
It did. Oh, and by the way, you will enjoy this. I don't know if you have access to Turner Classic Movies.
I do.
So they've been doing, it's the 100th anniversary of Warner Brothers. So in between movies, they've been running Warner Brothers cartoons. And there was one the other day, it was one of those cartoons they used to do when they were trying to do like the history of something. So this was it's a cartoon they did about the history of the automobile. And it's called Their Auto-Be-A Law.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. And it was very funny. It was very funny.
If any of you have Me TV, on Saturday morning between 9 and 10 o'clock, they call it the Bugs Bunny Show. But really what it is, it's not really necessarily all Bugs Bunny. It's Warner Brothers cartoons. But some of the cartoons that they have been showing, Joe, are in black and white, Porky Pig cartoons in black and white dating back to the 30s. And it's not Warner Brothers at the top; it's Vitaphone.
Vitaphone, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, if you want to see some interesting Warner, and then some of them that I haven't seen in, a good long time. I used to remember, and I'm sure you do too, watching on Channel 5, which usually was the station that would run Warner Brothers cartoons. Goes back in the 1960s with Uncle Fred Scott and Tom Gregory and Ed Ladd. These were staff announcers, but they also did the cartoon shows for the kids. And I mean, some of these cartoons I haven't seen, it touches a part of my brain. I haven't seen this in like 40 or 50 years. So if you want to see a piece of nostalgia, tune in between 9 and 10 o'clock on Saturday morning on Me TV and watch some of these cartoons. They're amazing. They also have the terrible cartoons. I mean, after Warner Brothers eventually merged with Seven Arts.
Oh, right, yeah.
Those cartoons were horrendous. The music was terrible. The animation was terrible. We're talking about those cartoons that were made in the 70s. Those were bad.
Well, it got so expensive to make to animations in the late 50s on, that the quality of the cartoons just went downhill. I mean, you see the same.
Exactly.
You see the somebody running over a long distance, and you see the same background just being shifted over and over,
circulating,
among other
exactly.
things.
Yeah.
All right, Leon Probitsky hitting super chat tonight. Thanks, Leon, most appreciated, and he's the last one to hit the tip jar tonight because
Leon hit it. Ken Musillo hit it. The chairman, in honor of his mom, who turned double H yesterday, hit it. Oh, by the way, those of you who might be amateur radio operators, Morse code operators, will know that double eights, 88s means, if you're doing it on Morse code keyboard here, 88s means love and
WCBS
kisses.
New York.
Oh, it doesn't mean WCBS. love and kisses. That's what somebody says 73s and 88s to you. 73 means good reception, and 88 means love and kisses. So love and kisses to Ma Briller on the day after her natal day yesterday.
Yes, happy birthday, Mother Briller. And Joe, the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125, the phone number. The website, omnitruevalue.com. And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat tonight, and also on the description to this video on YouTube. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, spell out the word "and," by the way, Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get 10% off on any purchase of any of their merchandise. Good night, Joe.
Good night, Mr. Cioffi.
Good night, everybody.